Peace be upon you. On April 24th, 1980, more than 6 million people tuned in to the Pennsylvania lottery to see which three numbers were going to determine the winning numbers for the lottery. And it just happened that the numbers were selected and the numbers were 666. Now you might ask, it's kind of a coincidence that these numbers were selected, being such a cultural significance of the mark of the beast in 666, but it's not reason enough to suspect foul play. Well, there ended up being a larger than normal number of winners for this particular lottery compared to other days. So they say, okay, well look, some lotteries are going to have more winners than others. It's nothing significant. This is a popular combination of digits, so what's the big deal? Well, it just happened that the authorities got a tip that there was a large number of tickets bought with the combinations of 4 and 6 during this specific lottery. And again, you can say, well, big deal. Maybe people just had an affinity towards numbers that had 4 and 6 in them. And this isn't reason to think that something malicious was going on. What's the big deal? It's just a coincidence. Well, when they weighed the numbers on that particular drawing, what they saw was that the numbers 4 and 6 in the machine were weighted lighter, making the probability of those numbers being selected higher, that the other numbers were coated with this thick latex paint that made them weigh more. And you say, okay, well, maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe, these numbers, for one reason or another, just happen to be weighed differently, and that, it's not foul play. It's just a coincidence. Maybe it's the manufacturers or something of that nature. Well, the authorities also got another tip that one of the people who was buying these numbers were two brothers, and they were going from store to store purchasing large combinations of lottery tickets with the numbers 4 and 6. Well, okay, big deal. They didn't commit a crime. They were just purchasing lottery tickets. Maybe they just felt very passionately about the numbers 4 and 6. Maybe it corresponds with a birthday or a lucky number. Who knows? Why get suspicious? Well, one of the bartenders who was selling these lottery tickets saw that one of the brothers was making a phone call. And they went and they traced the phone call to see who he called. And they saw that he called someone in the studio where they're recording the lottery numbers. Well, big deal. Maybe he just had a friend or a family in that studio, and he's very passionate about the lottery. So, why should we suspect that there's foul play or conspiracy? This is clearly all just a coincidence. Well, he also recalled that the person was speaking what sounded like Greek. And it just happened that the host of the lottery was also Greek. And again, well, there's, many people who speak Greek. What's to say that just because these brothers who purchase high quantities of tickets in the combinations of 4 and 6 that happen to be the two digits within the lottery that were the most likely to be selected on that particular drawing, that there was any conspiracy going on. Clearly, it's just a coincidence. People are reading too heavily into this. Well, then they found out that the brothers and the game show host, Nick Perry, for the lottery drawing, happened to be in business together, and they were in a side business on the side before getting into the showbiz business. So again, you say, okay, well, they know each other. They're both Greek, big deal. They probably called to just say hi and see how things were going. There's nothing to look at. We could move on. This is just all a big coincidence. Well, then they questioned the brothers, and the brothers said that Nick Perry, actually it was his idea, and told them to go buy the tickets, and that they were going to make a big winning when the numbers were selected. And well, there's a lot of people that make false confessions, and under duress they'll tell the police whatever it is that they want. Who's to say that their testimony is truthful? Again, this is all just a big coincidence. Well, then they investigated Nick Perry, and in his studio, they found the latex paint that was used to make the balls more heavy. And, maybe he just had this paint for other reasons. There's nothing to suspect that he was the one who's behind this conspiracy, that he had anything to do with it. Clearly, it's all just a big coincidence. And, eventually Nick Perry, he confesses as well and says, what he did, and he's in jail after the fact. So why do I bring up this example? The reason is because if we write everything off as just merely a coincidence, obvious incidents where there is a conspiracy, there's things that happen by design, we're going to look completely ignorant to. And there's a term in science known as specified complexity. It's to determine when is an outcome most likely done by just random chance, and when is it done by design. And you can think about it in the sense like when, there's someone dies, the authorities go to investigate. One of the things they want to investigate is, was this a natural death or was there foul play? And they're going to look at the evidence, they're going to look at this, the motives of individuals, the circumstances, and try to make a determination, was the death intentional or was it just natural causes? And it's the same thing in life. When we are presented with something, we have to determine, was this just a random event or was it done by design? And specified complexity helps us understand that. And I'll give an example. If I have a quarter and I flip this quarter 50 times and I record the outcome of each flip. So for instance, it's heads, 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 tails, tails, heads, tails, heads, 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 blah, 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 blah. That outcome of heads and tails, that sequence that I flipped, is incredibly rare. The likeliness of that outcome ever taking place in the history of the universe is astronomically small. But is there any significance to that outcome? And the answer is no, because if I got that outcome or any other outcome, it would held zero significance. I was bound to get one outcome. I just happened to get that series of heads and tails. Now, what if I was told I had to get a very specific outcome of heads and tails in a 50 coin toss flip? And if I was to deviate by just one flip, in the sense that one of the sequence was out of order, that I get a tails instead of a head, that I could lose my life. So I'm freaking out. I flip the coin 50 times in order. I record the flips, and I go and I compare it against what I was supposed to get, and I see that it matches perfectly. Every single flip was absolutely matched what was pre-assigned to me. So therefore, I get to keep my life. Now, no sensible person would walk away from this event and just say, yeah, it was just a mere coincidence. I just happened to be, get really lucky and flip the coin, the exact number of heads and tails in the exact sequence, and just walk away. I would clearly think that there must have been some deliberate manipulation, something by design that allowed me to get that exact sequence. Maybe the coin was weighted, maybe there was magnets under the table. God knows, there was something that was a more likely candidate to that outcome than sheer chance. Because randomness alone, the probability of that happening is so astronomically small that it's a lot more likely of a possibility that there was some manipulation. Maybe I didn't even flip the coins in those orders. Maybe what happened instead is I just said that that's the outcome I came to, that I was being untruthful just to be able to spare my life. These are more likely candidates than to think that I genuinely flipped a coin on a fair coin and just happened to get that, outcome, which the probability is 2 to the 50th, which is astronomically small. So again, we see this is how we use specified complexity. And I'll give you another real life example. When I was in college, I was in a parking lot and I see this car swerving around the corner, driving kind of recklessly. And I'm thinking, who is this person? Why are they driving so recklessly? And I look at their license plate and I see that it spells CATHUGS. And I see that as California thugs. And I think to myself momentarily, I say, okay, well, I'm in California. So it's natural that, this person would have such a license plate. The car looked a little dingy, a little beat up. So maybe this person thought they were a thug. And I know people that they would call themselves thugs. So, okay, everything kind of checks out. And sure enough, the car goes to drive past me. And it's not what I expected. It was a slightly overweight white woman with pigtails wearing some sort of animal print shirt. And as she drives past me, I notice that in her back seat is full of stuffed cat animals. And I came to realize that it didn't say CA thugs, California thugs. It actually said cat hugs. So this person, I wouldn't have thought, seeing her license plate, that this was just a random series of letters and numbers given by the DMV. I would see her plate and I would see that there was significance to those letters, that they signified something, that there was meaning behind them. And when I saw her and I saw her car and I saw the stuffed animals and I made the connection that, okay, the DMV did not just randomly assign this license plate to her, that she has a passion for cats and probably enjoys cat hugs. So again, you see that it's not random, it's by design. And this is what it means by specified complexity. So now that we set the groundwork, let's look at the mathematical structure of the Quran and determine, is it done by coincidence or by design? So the Quran is claimed to be authored by the Lord of the universe. In chapter 10, verse 37, it reads, "This Quran could not possibly be authored by other than God. It confirms all previous messages and provides a fully detailed scripture. It is infallible, for it comes from the Lord of the universe." So this is a book that is claimed to be written by the Lord of the universe, by God. So the claims have to be tested. We didn't pick this book in the sense that we said, hey, we're going to arbitrarily select a book. We selected a book that the author is claiming to be God. Then we look at, okay, the Quran contains 114 chapters. 29 of these surahs contain Quranic initials. For instance, in chapter 2, it's ALM. It says, "This scripture is infallible, a beacon for the righteous." In chapter 26, the letters are Ta, Sin, Mim, TSM in English, and it says, "These letters constitute proofs of this clarifying scripture." In Surah 38, the letter is S or Sad in Arabic, and it says, "The Quran that contains the proof." And if you look, there's about 14 different sets of Quranic initials in 29 different chapters. And these vary between Alif Lam Mim Sad, Alif Lam Ra, Ta Sin Mim, and it's a full set of Quranic initials. So again, we didn't pick the book. We didn't pick these initials. They were there for 1400 years, and for 1400 years, people didn't know what the significance of these Quranic initials were. And what about the number 19? Because this is the common denominator for the mathematical structure of the Quran. Did we select the number 19? And we see that we didn't. The number 19 is in Surah 74 entitled Al-Mudathir, or the hidden secret. And as we saw in a previous podcast, the word hidden secret literally means cryptography, when you hide a secret inside a message. And in chapter 74, starting from verse 1, it says, "O you hidden secret, come out and warn, extol your Lord, purify your garment," meaning purify this book. And it continues in 23 about the disbeliever who looked at the Quran, and it says, "He then turned away arrogantly. He said, 'This is but clever magic. This is human-made.'" That it's talking about a disbeliever who's going to read the Quran and claim that this book is human-made. And then in the following verse, it says, "Over it is 19. So this is where we get the number 19 from. And there's significance to this number, and it continues in verse 31. It says, "We appointed angels to be guardians of hell, and we assigned their number 19. And it gives 5 reasons. 1, to disturb the disbelievers. 2, to convince the Christians and Jews that this is a divine scripture. 3, to strengthen the faith of the faithful. 4, to remove all traces of doubt from the hearts of Christians, Jews, as well as the believers. And 5, to expose those who harbor doubt in their hearts. And the disbelievers, they will say, 'What did God mean by this allegory? God thus sends astray whomever he wills and guides whomever he wills. None knows the soldiers of your Lord except he. This is a reminder for the people. Absolutely, I swear by the moon and the night as it passes and the morning as it shines. This is one of the great miracles, a warning to the human race.'" So in this chapter that was given to Prophet Muhammad 1400 years ago, it discusses this number 19, that this is going to be the proof to show the disbeliever that this book is not human-made. And God is telling us 5 reasons for this proof. And then also that it's swearing that this is one of the great miracles, a warning to the human race. So we didn't pick the book. We didn't pick the letters. We didn't pick the number. But what's the significance of all this? If you look across these 29 chapters with these Quranic initials, what you'll see is that these letters occur in these given chapters consistently in multiples of 19. And I'll give you some examples. Chapter 42 and chapter 50 contain the initial Qaf, or Q in English. And we're only talking about the Arabic. The mathematical miracles in the Arabic, not the translation. So the letter Qaf occurs in both chapter 42 and 50 as the Quranic initial for those chapters. If you add the frequency of occurrence of this letter in these two chapters, both chapters it occurs 57 times, which is 19 times 3. And this is despite the fact that chapter 42 is almost twice as long as chapter 50. Chapter 68 is entitled The Pen, and the Quranic initial for chapter 68 is Nun. And if you count all the Nuns in this chapter, the sum is 133, which is 19 times 7. Go to another chapter, chapter 36. The initial is Yasin. If you count all the Yas and all the Sins in chapter 36, that number is 285, which is 19 times 15. Chapter 42 actually contains more initials. So it's a Hameen, Ain, Sin, Qaf. If you take Ain, Sin, Qaf from chapter 42 and you add all the Ains, all the Sins, and all the Qafs, that total you get is 209, which is 19 times 11. And keep in mind, Q occurs in this chapter as well, and the occurrence of Q in this chapter was 57, which is 19 times 3. And this pattern continues on in all 29 chapters with this interlocking mechanism as well. So for instance, Alif Lam Mim occurs in chapters 2, 3, 29, 30, 31, and 32. If you add all the alifs, all the lams, and all the memes in these given chapters, you consistently get multiples of 19. For instance, chapter 2 is the longest chapter in the entire Quran. It contains 286 verses. If you add all the alifs, all the lams, and all the memes, you get 9,899, which is 19 times 521. And this again occurs in every single surah that contains these initials. Same thing with Alif Lam Ra. If you add all the alifs, all the lams, and all the ras in their respective chapters where these initials occur, you will also get multiples of 19. And this pattern just continues on. And again, because there's this interlocking mechanism, some of the chapters that contain initials, multiple sets of initials, they will interlock with other chapters. Now, you can say, okay, well, look, we didn't pick the book, we didn't pick the number, we didn't pick the letters, and all this just happened by sheer coincidence. Now, that's a very, very unlikely scenario. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The mathematical miracle of the Quran goes so deep. And again, 1 out of every 19 numbers is a multiple of 19. That in itself is not a miracle. That's just a statistical property. But when you see something consistently hit the bullseye time and time again in such clear-cut fashion, you have to ask yourself, did this happen sheerly by coincidence, or is it more likely of an outcome that it was done by design? And this pattern just continues on and on. For instance, the opening statement of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, consists of 4 words, Bism Allah al-Rahman al-Rahim, and in English, it's name, God, Allah, most gracious, al-Rahman, most merciful, al-Rahim. And these words occur in the Quran in frequencies of multiples of 19. The word Allah occurs 2,698. The word al-Rahman occurs, which is most gracious, occurs 57 times, which is 19 times 3. The word ism, name, occurs 19 times in the Quran. The word al-Rahim, most merciful, occurs 114 times in the Quran. And these are in the numbered verses of the Quran. And, it goes on and on. The number of verses in the Quran is 6,346, which is 19 times 334. The number of chapters in the Quran, surahs in the Quran, is 114, which is 19 times 6. At what point would someone go and look at all these? And these aren't ways of manipulating the text. These are simple, just count the letters, count the verses, count the occurrences of words within the Quran, and you'll see consistently they end up becoming multiples of 19. So what's a more likely scenario? That this is all just sheer coincidence? That the number 19 that God calls one of the great miracles, that says it's going to increase the faith of the faithful, that this is just, it has nothing to do with the structure, that these initials occur in these chapters in multiples of 19, that's just a sheer coincidence. You realize that these things all happen by design. So the question is, did this happen because of sheer coincidence, Or was it because the person who created this was truly the Lord of the universe? So I'll just leave you with this. Imagine me and you were hiking, and we go and we stare up at the mountainside, and we see the faces of 4 of the founding fathers of the United States. We see the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. And I look at you and I say, oh my God, look, what a coincidence. The wind and erosion has caused the founding fathers' faces to be chiseled into the side of this mountain. You would look at me and say, you're crazy. It's absurd. Clearly, these faces hold significance. The fact that it's in the United States that we see these faces, the fact that they have significance to the founding fathers. A more likely scenario is that someone by design carved these faces into the side of the mountain. It doesn't matter how many mountaintops you look at, how many planets you travel to. You are never going to see the faces of these 4 people so perfectly attributed side by side in the side of a mountain unless it was done by design. And it's the same thing with the Quran. The likeliness that these coincidences all occurred on their own, that there was no design incorporated, is such a far stretch. Now you have to ask yourself, was Muhammad capable of being able to do such deliberation within the Quran, that he was able to keep track of every single letter, every single word, the placement of every verse and surah, all this at the time? Keep in mind, this is 1400 years ago. They didn't even have the Arabic numerals like we had today. The letters constituted the numbers similar to what you see in the Roman numbers. So was it Muhammad who was just so clever? And if he was the one who did this by design, he didn't tell a soul. He never mentioned it to anyone. It says in the Quran that he was not even aware of this. In chapter 10, verse 20, it says, how come no miracles come down to him? Say, the future belongs to God, so wait, and I'm waiting along with you. Meaning that Prophet Muhammad did not have a physical miracle like the other the prophets and messengers. He was completely oblivious to the mathematical structure of the Quran. And that's the reason that in the Quran, God gives this challenge. And I'm going to repeat it again. This is from 1037. It says, this Quran could not possibly be authored by other than God. It confirms all previous messages and provides a fully detailed scripture. It is infallible, for it comes from the Lord of the universe. If they say he fabricated it, say, then produce one surah like these and invite whomever you wish other than God if you are truthful. Indeed, they have rejected this without studying and examining it and before understanding it. Thus did those before them disbelieve. Therefore, note the consequences for the transgressors. So here, God is giving a challenge to anyone who's claiming that this Quran is man-made to produce one surah like these. And it just happens that chapter 10 is in an ALR chapter. And in chapter 10, verse 1, it reads, Alif Lam Ra, or ALR, these letters are proofs of this book of wisdom. And God has 11 chapters in the Quran with these mathematical properties of Alif Lam Ra, Alif Ram Mim, because if you add all the Alif, all the Lam, and all the Ra in chapter 10, you get 2,489, which is 19 times 131. And again, to say that this happened by sheer coincidence is quite an outlandish statement. So God willing, we're going to end there. If you guys got comments or questions, please hit us up at QuranTalk@gmail.com or on Twitter at TalkQuran. And until next time, peace and God bless.
La